Welcome to the Urban Herald. We're your analytical team, and today we are diving deep, really deep, into something absolutely fundamental: food.
Yeah, and we're not just scratching the surface here, looking at farming stats or, poverty numbers. We're actually examining what happens when food, something essential for human life, gets treated just like any other financial asset.
It creates this stark paradox, doesn't it? It's almost hard to wrap your head around.
It really is. Because globally, we produce an incredible amount of food. Honestly, enough calories to feed 10 billion people. That's way more than we have now.
So the problem isn't supply, not fundamentally.
Exactly. And yet, despite that abundance, you've got 735 million people facing chronic hunger every single day.
That gap, that's what we're focusing on, right? The gap between this massive production and the reality of widespread hunger. Why does it exist? That's the core question for us as analysts at the Urban Herald.
And the answer, well, the answer that emerges from the data and the sources we've looked at, it's structural. It points to this, frankly, catastrophic shift. It's the transformation of food from, a basic human right, something everyone needs, into just another commodity, something to be bought and sold on financial markets.
Like oil or gold or tech stocks.
Precisely. When basic staples think wheat, corn, soybeans get treated like that, their actual human value just gets stripped away. It's replaced by, speculative profit margins.
And the consequences of that shift. That's what we're exploring, the price we pay.
Yeah, and it's a huge price. It shows up as what some call nutritional apartheid, this segregation based on who can afford healthy food. It shows up as epidemics of chronic disease linked to diet. And it creates massive global volatility.
That volatility is key. It doesn't hit everyone equally, does it?
Not at all. The poorest get hit the hardest, always. Just look at the last few years. Food prices in the U.S. shot up, 25% between 2020 and 2024? That's tough.
Yeah, people felt that.
But in low-income countries, it was exponentially worse. We saw food inflation hitting an average of 30% during 2023-2024. 30%.
It's unimaginable.
And for essential staples, the things people absolutely rely on, prices often soared over 50%. This isn't just tightening your belt. For millions, it's an existential crisis. Life-saving food becomes completely unaffordable almost overnight.
So our goal here in this Urban Herald deep dive is to really unpack that, give you, the listener, the detailed insights to understand how this system works, or maybe how it doesn't work for so many.
Exactly. It's about understanding the forces at play, so we can maybe start thinking about, reclaiming some dignity on the plate for everyone. Okay, so let's start with the foundation, the legal bedrock. Because access to adequate, nutritious food isn't just a nice idea. It's actually defined in international law as a human right.
A non-negotiable right, you're saying, not just like charity.
Absolutely not charity. It's an obligation.
Yeah.
Governments that sign on to these agreements are legally bound to ensure this right for their people.
And where is this formally stated? Which documents?
The big ones are Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Article 11 of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. They explicitly recognize everyone's right to an adequate standard of living, and that includes adequate food.
Okay, adequate food. That sounds like it could mean different things. How is it defined in this legal context? It's probably more than just getting enough calories, right?
Much more. The definition is actually quite specific and demanding. Food has to be safe. First off, no contaminants. It needs to be continuous, so reliably available.
Okay.
It has to be nutritionally appropriate, providing the vitamins and minerals people actually need, not just empty calories. Culturally appropriate, too, respecting local diets and traditions. And, crucially for the long term, produced sustainably.
That's a lot packed into adequate.
It is. But there's another layer, maybe the most critical legal point. The right to food includes having the means for its procurement.
Okay. Explain that. That sounds important.
It means it's not enough to just hand out food parcels. People have a right to be able to obtain food themselves with dignity. That usually means having the economic power, a decent job, fair wages, access to land, or resources to feed themselves and their families.
So it shifts the focus from dependency to empowerment. It's about enabling people, not just providing aid.
Exactly. It recognizes that true dignity comes from agency, from being able to provide for yourself.
This legal framework seems to have a strong moral underpinning, too. I'm thinking of people like Jean Ziegler.
Yes, the former UN Special Rapporteur on the right to food. He was incredibly blunt. He argued that in a world that produces more than enough food, letting people die of hunger isn't just a tragedy, it's, quote, murder.
That's a powerful word.
He used it deliberately to make the point that chronic hunger isn't some natural disaster we can't control. It's often the direct result of human choices, policy choices, economic system choices.
This distinction between just having anything to eat and having proper nutrition, that idea isn't new, is it? I know researchers were talking about this decades ago.
You're right. We can trace it back, prominently, to the Brazilian physician José de Castro back in the mid-20th century.
His book, Geography of Hunger.
That's the one, Geografia da Fome. Based on years of fieldwork, it was groundbreaking. He made this crucial distinction between what he called total hunger, literally not having enough calories, starving, and hidden hunger.
Hidden hunger. That sounds relevant even today, maybe especially today, even in richer countries.
Absolutely. Hidden hunger is what happens when you get enough calories. But those calories are nutritionally poor. It's the deficiency in essential micronutrients, vitamins like A, minerals like iron or zinc.
So you might feel full.
You might feel full, yes, but your body, your brain, your immune system, they're essentially being starved of what they need to function properly. It's this silent epidemic.
And that's precisely what we see with the rise of certain kinds of foods today.
Exactly. When cheap, ultra-processed foods dominate, people might consume enough energy, but they lack those vital nutrients. De Castro saw this decades ago. It proves that just filling stomachs or supermarket shelves isn't enough. The quality of the food is fundamental.
Okay, so that distinction, total versus hidden hunger, helps us understand where the system fails. It leads us nicely into this framework you mentioned, the 4 pillars of food security. Can we walk through those?
Sure. It's a standard framework used internationally. Pillar 1 is availability. Do we produce enough food globally?
And the answer there, as we said, is mostly yes. About 2,900 calories per person per day are produced. More than enough.
Right. So pillar 1, broadly okay. Pillar 2 is accessibility. Can people actually get the food that's available?
And this is where the system breaks down catastrophically, according to the sources.
This is the massive failure point. The food exists, but nearly 2.6 billion people simply cannot afford a healthy diet. The market price becomes an insurmountable barrier. Access is blocked by economics.
Okay, pillar 3.
Adequacy. Is the food people can access actually nutritious enough? This ties right back to hidden hunger and the commodification trend.
Because cheap processed calories become the default.
Exactly. Adequacy fails when the most readily available and affordable foods are the ultra-processed ones, lacking essential nutrients. Fresh, healthy food becomes a luxury item, compromising nutritional adequacy even when calories are sufficient.
And the final pillar.
Pillar 4, sustainability. Is the way we produce food sustainable in the long run? And here again, the current system is failing badly.
How so?
Industrial agriculture often relies on practices that damage the environment, depleting soil, using too much water, relying on fossil fuels. Climate change itself is making harvests less predictable.
And then there's waste.
And the staggering amount of food waste. About a third of all food produced globally is lost or wasted somewhere between the farm and the fork. It's incredibly inefficient. So the system produces a lot, but it's failing on access, adequacy, and sustainability.
Right. Let's drill down into that core mechanism driving the failure, especially on pillar 2, accessibility. This idea of food becoming a commodity. How does a basic crop, like wheat, turn into a financial asset?
Well, think about it simply. The price of, say, rice should be set by how much people want to eat it and how much farmers can grow, supply and demand, basically.
Okay, standard economics.
But when food becomes a financial commodity, you introduce a whole new set of players. Investment firms, hedge funds, banks. They start trading contracts for that rice or wheat or corn.
And they're not buying it to eat it.
Absolutely not. They're buying it purely as an investment. They're betting on price movements. So now the price isn't just about farmers and eaters anymore. It's heavily influenced by decisions made in boardrooms in New York or London or Chicago.
And a decision made there
Can instantly affect the price of tortillas for a family in Mexico or the cost of bread for someone in Egypt. The price gets disconnected from the actual physical reality of the food and tied instead to financial market dynamics.
This wasn't always the case, though, was it? This intense financialization of food seems more recent.
It definitely accelerated. The sources point to a major shift after the year 2000, driven largely by deregulation.
Specific.
A key piece of legislation in the U.S. was the Commodities Futures Modernization Act, the CFMA, passed in 2000.
Okay.
It basically opened the floodgates. It significantly reduced regulations on commodity markets, especially for complex financial products derived from them.
Creating loopholes.
Huge loopholes.
Yeah.
It allowed big financial players, entities with absolutely no connection to farming or food processing, to pour into these markets. Hedge funds, investment banks, even pension funds started trading food futures on a massive scale with few limits.
Okay, let's clarify that term. What exactly is a futures contract in this food context, and how does a bank trading it affect my loaf of bread?
Right, so a futures contract is basically an agreement. You agree to buy or sell a specific amount of something, say 5,000 bushels of corn at a set price on a specific date in the future.
Oh.
Now, historically, farmers used these to lock in a price for their future harvest, managing risk. And food companies, like a cereal maker, use them to guarantee their supply of corn at a known cost. It was a tool for stability.
But when the speculators jump in,
They have no interest in the actual corn. They're just betting the price will go up before the contract date. So they buy up thousands of these contracts.
creating demand.
Exactly. But it's artificial demand. The market sees all this buying activity for corn futures and thinks, wow, there must be huge demand for corn coming up, maybe a shortage. And so the current price, the spot price of actual physical corn, gets driven up.
Even if there's plenty of corn sitting in silos.
Even if supply is perfectly fine, the financial market activity dictates the physical price, regardless of the real-world supply and demand for food.
That explains the numbers we saw. Investment in these food commodities just exploded, didn't it?
It really did. It went from around $65 billion globally in 2007 to $126 billion by 2012. In just 5 years. And get this, by 2010, these financial institutions, not farmers, not food companies, controlled something like 61% of all the trading in wheat futures.
61%. That's staggering. They were basically setting the price.
In large part, yes. And we saw the devastating impact during the recent food price crisis of 2020 and 2023. Geopolitical events, like the conflict in Ukraine, definitely played a role by disrupting some supply.
Sure, that was a factor.
But analyses show that maybe only 40–50% of the price spikes could be explained by those actual supply issues.
There's the rest.
The rest was driven by speculation. Some studies estimated that during the peak, up to 80% of the purchases of wheat futures were purely speculative. 80%.
That's incredible. So the price surge wasn't just about a shortage, it was massively amplified by financial betting.
Massively amplified. Wheat prices, for instance, rose about 60% higher than what the supply and demand fundamentals alone would justify.
And who benefits from that?
Well, the investment banks and hedge funds made enormous profits. Meanwhile, that inflated price pushed millions of people into severe food insecurity because basic bread simply became unaffordable.
The impact on different regions really highlights the injustice. You mentioned low-income countries facing 30% inflation.
Exactly. And staples up over 50%. It's a direct hit to survival. But even in Europe, it was bad. 19% food inflation overall in 2023.
And higher in some places.
Yeah, Estonia, Lithuania, Hungary saw rates over 25%. And we mentioned the UK, the poorest households needing to spend nearly half their disposable income just to eat healthy. It shows how this financial system reaches everywhere.
The reliance on imports makes countries incredibly vulnerable too, like Egypt.
Egypt's a classic case. They import around 80% of their wheat. When global prices surged, partly due to speculation, local bread prices tripled. Across Africa and the Middle East, this crisis pushed an estimated 345 million people into acute food insecurity.
And then there's the really cruel irony in places like Latin America.
Right. Countries that are agricultural powerhouses, huge exporters of food, yet their own people are struggling. Argentina, a massive food exporter, saw food inflation hit 95% in 2023.
95%, while exporting food globally.
And Brazil, another giant exporter, had 33 million people facing hunger by 2024. The logic of commodification means the priority is selling the soybeans, the corn, the beef on the international market to get the highest price, the best foreign exchange.
Even if the people who live there, who maybe even helped grow it, can't afford to eat properly.
That's the system. Profit maximization trumps basic human needs. So when you let these market forces, amplified by speculation, dictate food prices and availability, what you get on the ground is this geographic segregation. It's been termed nutritional apartheid.
Nutritional apartheid, that's a strong term. What does it mean in practice?
It means healthy, nutritious food becomes systematically inaccessible based on where you live and how much money you have. It creates physical zones of poor nutrition alongside zones of plenty.
The most common example people might know is the food desert.
Right. The USDA has a technical definition. Urban areas where residents are more than a mile from a full-service supermarket, or rural areas where they're more than 10 miles away. Basically, places lacking easy access to affordable fresh food.
And this isn't a niche problem. How widespread is it?
It's significant. In the U.S., estimates are around 19 million people live in these officially designated food deserts. The UK reports about 1.2 million facing similar access issues.
What does that look like day to day for someone living there?
Think about a neighborhood, maybe in a city like Detroit, that literally has no proper grocery store. Your options are the corner convenience store, maybe a gas station mini mart.
Selling what? Chips, soda, packaged cakes?
Exactly. Lots of processed items with long shelf lives, but very little fresh produce, lean meats, or whole grains. And if they do have an apple or a banana, it's often expensive and maybe not very fresh. So the cheap, easy choice is always the unhealthy one.
But it's not just about the lack of good options, is it? There's also the overwhelming presence of bad options.
That's the concept of the food swamp. It's an area that isn't necessarily empty of food outlets, but it's saturated with unhealthy ones. Fast food chains, convenience stores selling mostly junk food, maybe liquor stores.
They just drown out the healthy choices.
Completely. They set the local food environment. There's an example from Northwest England where some areas have something like 230 fast food outlets per 100,000 people. The national average is 96.
Wow, more than double.
So even if a small grocery store tried to open selling fresh produce, it's competing against this tidal wave of cheap, heavily marketed, hyper-palatable fast food. It shapes eating habits. It shapes what kids see as normal food.
Which brings us squarely to the cost. Even if healthy options are physically present, can people afford them?
That's the brutal reality. The cost barrier is immense. Study after study shows healthy foods consistently cost significantly more per calorie than unhealthy processed options.
How much more are we talking?
One UK analysis put it at more than double, roughly £8.80 for 1,000 calories from healthy foods versus £4.30 for 1,000 calories from unhealthy ones.
So if your budget is tight,
The economic signal is unavoidable. Eat the less healthy stuff to make your money stretch further. You're forced to trade nutrition for affordability.
and you mentioned this gap is widening.
Yes. Recent inflation hit healthy foods harder. Prices for those went up around 21%, while the unhealthier options rose more slowly, about 11%. So that choice is becoming even starker, pushing healthy eating further out of reach for many.
Which leads back to that shocking UK statistic.
That the most deprived fifth of the population would need to spend 45%, almost half of their disposable income, just to follow the government's own healthy eating guidelines.
45%, that's just not feasible. If you spend that on food, what's left for rent, utilities, transport, clothes?
Exactly. It's an impossible choice. It demonstrates a fundamental market failure with profound social consequences.
And those consequences show up in health data mapped directly onto geography. This idea that your zip code can be a better predictor of your health than your genetic code.
It's tragically accurate. Living in these nutritionally deprived areas has measurable, devastating health impacts. We see it clearly with childhood obesity. Kids in the most deprived areas are twice as likely to be obese compared to those in the least deprived.
It's not about individual willpower then.
It's overwhelmingly about the environment, the lack of access, the economic pressures, and it gets worse. Life expectancy differences are stark.
Like the Baltimore example.
Yes, studies there found life expectancy in some food desert neighborhoods can be 20 years lower, 2 decades, than in affluent areas just a short distance away.
20 years difference based on neighborhood.
It's driven by a combination of factors, but food access and diet quality are major components, alongside things like pollution and chronic stress from poverty. We also see it with chronic diseases,
Diabetes.
especially type 2 diabetes. In the American South, where food deserts are particularly common in many communities, diabetes rates are around 40% higher than the national average. This isn't just about inconvenience. It's a system that actively shortens lives and creates chronic illness.
Okay, so let's focus on the specific products that fill these food swamps and often become the default in food deserts. We're talking about ultra-processed foods, UPFs. We need to understand what they actually are, beyond just calling them junk food.
Right. The best framework for this is the NOVA classification system. It categorizes food based on the level of processing, not just ingredients. UPFs are group 4, the highest level.
And what defines them?
They're essentially industrial formulations, usually 5 or more ingredients, often many more. They're specifically engineered for things like extreme shelf stability, low cost to produce, high profit margins, and, crucially, hyperpalatability.
Meaning they taste really good, maybe too good.
Exactly. and they often contain substances you'd never use in your home kitchen. Things like emulsifiers, thickeners, stabilizers, artificial flavors, colorants, high fructose corn syrup, hydrogenated oils. These aren't just ingredients. They fundamentally alter the food structure and how our body interacts with it.
They're designed to sell, basically, not necessarily to nourish.
Precisely. And a key part of that design is engineering them to be almost addictive
How do they do that?
through sophisticated food science. They manipulate the combinations of sugar, salt, and fat to hit what's sometimes called the bliss point. This creates a very intense, very rapid reward signal in the brain, similar in some ways to how addictive drugs work. It makes you want more, even when you're not hungry.
There's actual evidence that companies do this deliberately, right? Aiming for overconsumption.
Oh, yes. Internal industry documents have surfaced over the years showing explicit strategies for craving optimization. Memos discussing how to formulate products to bypass the body's natural satiety signals the mechanisms that tell you you're full.
So you keep eating.
So you keep eating. One infamous memo from a major snack food company in the late 90s literally talked about creating heavy users by making the product so irresistible people couldn't stop.
That's quite cynical.
It's built into the business model. UPFs offer fantastic profit margins because the base ingredients are often very cheap commodities, and the processing adds huge value for the manufacturer. High volume sales are key, and hyperpalatability drives that volume.
And these products are marketed more heavily in certain areas.
Disproportionately so in low-income neighborhoods. Because they're cheap, convenient, require no preparation, and have that intense sensory appeal, they're an easier sell, where budgets are tight and time is scarce.
You see the advertising differences.
Clearly. Studies show children in lower-income households see significantly more ads for unhealthy foods, sugary cereals, fast food, candy, processed snacks. Around 13 food ads per hour during typical kids programming, compared to maybe 7 in more affluent areas. They're constantly being bombarded with messages pushing these UPFs.
Creating this vicious cycle, especially when combined with food insecurity.
Exactly. When you're stressed about money, maybe working multiple jobs, the immediate reward and comfort from cheap, tasty UPFs can be incredibly hard to resist. The data backs this up. Adults experiencing very low food security, meaning they're often skipping meals or running out of food, get about 55.7% of their total daily calories from UPFs. That's higher than the average. Financial hardship literally pushes people towards these foods.
And the health consequences are becoming undeniable now. The research is quite strong.
Overwhelmingly strong. Major reviews, like those in the British Medical Journal, BMJ, now classify the evidence linking high UPF consumption to poor health outcomes as convincing.
What kind of outcomes are we talking about?
It's across the board. Just a 10% increase in the proportion of your calories coming from UPFs is associated with a 12% higher of cardiovascular disease and an 11% higher risk of depression.
Depression, too. Interesting.
Yes, the links to mental health are emerging as well.
Yeah.
And for physical health, the risks escalate with intake. High consumption, like 4 more servings a day, is linked to a 32% increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes.
That's huge.
And very recent research from 2024 has found strong links between high UPF intake and a 30% increased risk of colorectal cancer, particularly in men. The biological toll is severe.
Which leads to this ultimate cruel irony about cost. The food seems cheap.
But the health care needed to treat the diseases it causes is incredibly expensive. The U.S., for example, spends something like $1.72 trillion every year on diet-related chronic diseases. That's almost 10% of the entire U.S. GDP.
And who pays for that $1.72 trillion?
Largely the public, through taxes funding Medicare and Medicaid, through higher insurance premiums for everyone. In the UK, the National Health Service spends over £6 billion directly treating obesity and related conditions, but the total economic burden, including lost workdays and social care, is estimated closer to $27 billion a year.
So the companies make the profit selling the UPFs.
They privatize the profits, yes.
And society picks up the massive bill for the resulting sickness.
Exactly. The costs are socialized, while the profits are privatized. It's a fundamentally broken economic equation.
Okay, this is grim. But as analysts, we have to look at solutions. The picture painted so far suggests the problem is deeply systemic, but you're saying it's not hopeless. There are ways to fix this.
Absolutely. The key takeaway from our analysis is that the barriers aren't really technical or even primarily economic anymore. We know what works. The main obstacle is political will.
So what does work? What are the proven solutions?
Now, fiscal policies are a powerful lever. Using taxes and subsidies strategically, The World Health Organization recommends this.
Taxing the bad stuff, subsidizing the good stuff.
Basically, yes. And interestingly, research suggests that subsidies might be even more effective at changing behavior, especially for lower income groups. Making healthy food cheaper seems to have a bigger impact than just making unhealthy food more expensive.
Give me an example.
Studies show a 10% decrease in the price of healthy foods like fruit and vegetables can lead to a 12% increase in purchases. People respond strongly to affordability.
Okay, but taxes have worked too, right? We've seen examples globally.
Definitely. Mexico is a standout case. In 2014, they put a 10% tax on sugary drinks.
And the result?
Overall purchases dropped by 7.6%. But crucially, among the lowest income households, the drop was even bigger, 11.7%. It showed the tax was having the intended effect, nudging behavior change where health risks are often highest.
What about other countries?
Chile took a really comprehensive approach. They didn't just tax sugary drinks. They introduced mandatory, very clear front-of-package warning labels, big black stop signs, indicating high levels of sugar, salt, fat, or calories.
I've seen pictures of those. They're quite stark.
They are, and they combine that with strict restrictions on marketing unhealthy foods, especially to children.
And did that whole package work?
Dramatically. Purchases of high-sugar drinks fell by 25%. But maybe even more importantly, the warning labels themselves were so effective, nobody wanted that black label on their product that it forced the industry to change. About 25% of products were reformulated by companies before the rules even fully kicked in, just to avoid the label.
So regulations spurred innovation in a way.
Exactly. Health-focused innovation. The UK's soft drinks industry levy worked similarly. It was cleverly designed with tiers.
How so?
A higher tax rate kicked in for drinks above a certain sugar threshold. 8 grams per 100 milliliters. It gave manufacturers a strong financial incentive to reduce sugar content below that level.
And did they?
Overwhelmingly. Again, much of the change happened before the tax was implemented. The market share of high-sugar drinks plummeted from nearly 50% down to about 15%. It showed you can shift industry norms with smart regulation.
Okay, so taxes and warning labels work. What about the subsidy side, making healthy food cheaper?
There are good models there, too. In the U.S., some programs built onto the SNAP system, the food stamp program, have shown real promise. Double Up Food Bucks is a well-known one.
How does that work?
It essentially matches the value of SNAP benefits when they're spent on fresh fruits and vegetables, often at farmers markets or participating stores. So your food dollars go twice as far for healthy produce.
Does it increase consumption?
Yes. Evaluations show it leads to about a 26% increase in fruit and vegetable purchases among participants. Simple economics. Make it affordable, people buy more.
Beyond tweaking prices, what about using the government's own buying power? Public procurement.
This is potentially huge and often overlooked. Governments are massive food purchasers for schools, hospitals, military bases, government canteens, prisons. They can use that purchasing power to create guaranteed markets for healthy, sustainable food.
The prime example often cited is Brazil, right?
Brazil's national school feeding program is the gold standard. It feeds something like 43 million students daily. That's an enormous food budget.
In the key policy.
The law requires that at least 30% of that massive budget must be spent on food sourced directly from local, small-scale family farms.
Wow, so it connects school meals directly to supporting local agriculture.
Precisely. It supports around 130,000 family farmers, boosts local economies, and improves the nutritional quality of school meals, often using fresh, regional produce.
Does it cost more?
The program costs about $1.5 billion a year, but studies estimate the economic and social benefits: better health, better educational outcomes, reduced rural poverty, generate around $4 billion in return. It's a high-yield social investment.
Are there examples in richer countries, too?
Yes. Copenhagen famously managed to get 90% organic food into all its public institutions, schools, nurseries, elder care homes by 2015.
90% organic. That must have cost a fortune.
Actually, no. They did it without increasing their overall food budget. The key was smart management. Reducing food waste, serving slightly less meat, buying seasonal produce, and establishing direct relationships with local organic farmers to cut out middlemen.
So it's possible with planning.
Definitely. Sweden also made significant strides, reaching about 32% organic food in public procurement, which helped drive demand and support for organic farming nationwide.
Okay, shifting gears slightly, there's also this idea of moving beyond just food security towards food sovereignty. What's the difference?
Food security, essentially, means ensuring people have access to enough food. But that food could be imported. It could be dependent on global markets. Food sovereignty is a deeper concept. It emphasizes the right of communities and peoples to define their own food and agriculture systems.
More local control.
Yes, more local control, prioritizing local needs, often focusing on ecologically sustainable and culturally appropriate production methods rather than just maximizing export commodities.
Can you give an example?
Cuba's experience after the Soviet Union collapsed is a dramatic, albeit forced, example. Suddenly, their imports of fuel, pesticides, fertilizers vanished.
They had to adapt quickly.
They had to. And they did, largely through a shift towards agroecology, smaller scale, diverse farming methods, often in urban and peri-urban gardens, using ecological principles instead of chemical inputs. By 2024, estimates suggest they were producing around 70% of their own food domestically, with cities like Havana getting maybe half their fresh vegetables from these urban farms.
So resilience through local control.
Exactly. And you see similar principles in grassroots movements elsewhere. Like Soulfire Farm in New York. It's an Afro-Indigenous-centered community farm, explicitly working to fight food apartheid by training farmers, building local food access, and promoting what they call liberation on land. It connects food justice with racial justice and community empowerment.
Finally, what about just straightforward regulation on the food products themselves?
That's crucial too. Mandatory reformulation is one tool. Portugal, for example, set legal limits for salt, sugar, and trans fats in certain processed foods, requiring gradual reductions over time. They aimed for, I think, a 30% sodium reduction in bread by 2024.
Making the standard food supply healthier by default.
Yes, improving public health passively without requiring individual behavior change first. And then there are marketing restrictions.
Like the Quebec example.
Right. Quebec has had a ban on commercial advertising directed at children under 13 since 1980. It's one of the longest-standing, strictest bans in the world.
And has it made a difference?
Studies comparing Quebec to other Canadian provinces suggest it has. Quebec tends to have lower rates of fast food consumption among children and, consequently, lower rates of childhood obesity. It shows that regulating the marketing environment matters. So when you pull all this analysis together, the conclusion is pretty stark, but also hopeful in a way. The path to ensuring everyone has access to adequate, healthy food isn't blocked by a lack of knowledge or technology. We have the solutions.
We know what works: the taxes, the subsidies, the procurement policies, the support for local food systems.
Exactly. The real barriers are political. It's about challenging the entrenched power structures, the huge multinational food corporations, the financial institutions profiting from speculation that benefit from the current system.
The cost of not changing is enormous, right? We talked about the healthcare costs.
Astronomical. The $1.72 trillion in the U.S. alone for diet-related diseases. The billions in the UK. Add to that lost productivity, reduced quality of life, the sheer human suffering. The costs of inaction far, far exceed the costs of implementing these proven solutions. It's just about political courage.
And we also need to see how fixing the food system connects to other major crises. It's not just about food in isolation.
Absolutely not. It's deeply linked to climate change, for instance. Industrial agriculture is a massive contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, maybe 25–30% globally.
Whereas sustainable methods...
Sustainable regenerative agriculture, the kind often championed by food sovereignty movements, can actually sequester carbon in the soil, helping mitigate climate change while also building resilience. So food system transformation is climate action.
It's also fundamentally tied to justice issues, racial justice you mentioned.
Yes. The legacy of historical injustices, like redlining and discrimination, directly shape the geography of food access we see today. That's why Black Americans, for example, are 2.5 times more likely to experience food insecurity. Addressing nutritional apartheid requires tackling these deep roots of systemic racism.
And workers' rights, too. Cheap food often relies on exploited labor.
That's a critical link. We can't talk about ethical food without talking about fair wages and safe working conditions for the people who grow, harvest, process, and serve it. Movements like the coalition of Immokalee workers in Florida, who successfully pressured huge corporations to pay more for tomatoes to ensure fair wages for pickers, show that change is possible.
So individual actions matter, supporting local farmers, maybe growing some food, advocating for policy, but they aren't enough on their own?
They're important. They build awareness and momentum. But ultimately, the scale of the problem demands structural change. It requires governments to step up, regulate markets effectively, and prioritize the public good, the human right to food, over private profit maximization.
It really comes down to how we view food. Is it just another product, or is it something more fundamental?
That's the core choice.
So the meal that you, our listener, might have tonight, It connects you. It connects you to this whole global web of finance, policy, labor, agriculture, and history. It links the supermarket aisle to the trading floor in Chicago, to a farmer's field in Brazil, to the health outcomes in your own community.
Every plate tells a story.
And the question we want to leave you with from us here at the Urban Herald is this: what story is that plate telling right now? Is the system it represents serving human flourishing and dignity, or is it primarily serving corporate extraction? That's the future we collectively need to choose. A future where everyone, truly everyone, eats with dignity.